All Indiana Politics is your premier source for Indiana politics, focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Good morning and welcome to All Indiana Politics. I'm Garrett Bergquist in for Phil Sanchez. Anticipation is building for a potential presidential run by former Vice President and Indiana Governor Mike Pence. His older brother, Congressman Greg Pence, tells me he's among the voices pushing for a presidential run. We talked about that and the debt ceiling negotiations. With us now is Congressman Greg Pence. Congressman, thank you for dropping by today.
Hello, Garrett. Thanks for having me.
Your brother's given every indication that he is strongly considering a run for president in 2024. Do you want to see him run?
I've been begging him to run since he talked about it last Thanksgiving. I think my brother brings really about three things to the table. One, he'd bring back the conversations about Christian, conservative, fiscally responsible Republican Party dialogue, principles. The other is, I think, if my brother won the primary a year from now, he could form a phenomenal cabinet. He knows the international scene, he knows the Washington, D.C., and he knows all the players with the expertise. And the last is, frankly, I'd love to see him debate President Trump. I think he would know how to do that, and he's a world-class debater.
Do you think the Republican Party would accept him as a nominee? I mean, President Trump's supporters view him as a traitor.
Yeah, well, we'll see. You know, that's I get a lot of positive. President Trump, and which my wife and I, along with the rest of my family, my son worked for the president for a long time. I don't have any negatives about the president, but I think looking to the future with my brother, I'm not alone in thinking it's time to take a different path. It's time to look ahead and not backwards.
Do you know when we might have a final announcement from your brother, the former vice president, as to whether or not he will run?
I wish it was last month, so the sooner the better. I hope he gets in. You're aware that a super PAC on his behalf was funded, was stood up this Monday of this week. Where he goes from there, he's my younger brother and he doesn't listen to me all the time. So,
based on what you're seeing, how likely is it that we will not get a deal in time to avert a default?
I believe we're going to get a deal whenever the default is. You know, that actually moved a little bit. I was in D.C. all this week. There's a lot of progress. There's a lot of positive comments coming out. But frankly, the debate and the conversations are really being kept quiet, which I think is appropriate. There's a tendency for a lot of my peers to run to the camera and give their opinion about rumors or innuendos, and I think that not being part of the dialogue and the conversations right now is a good thing. But I think something will get done. You hear a little bit here and a little bit there, but we'll see. Next week, I really feel that by the end of the week, we're going to have something maybe to vote on. I'd like to remind the viewers that, it was about December 22nd when the House passed a $1.7 trillion omnibus budget for this year, and then 3 weeks later, Yellen said, hey, we're out of money. That kind of activity and timing's just been inappropriate. It's been too long for people to know what's going on and to have this conversation.
Would you vote for a short-term spending extension if it did not include spending cuts?
Well, I voted for a bill already, having been a member of the Republican Party in the House of Representatives. I've already done my job in that respect. Your question is if something comes back, and changes the bill that I voted on, would I have an interest in that? I'm just going to have to see what it is, Garrett.
Is it worth the risk of the economic and political damage to say no deal without spending cuts?
Well, we have to do spending cuts. How this is our opportunity for those of us that are fiscally conservative to push this forward. You know, we just can't. Adding $10 trillion in the last 3 or 4 years is just unsustainable, as we know. You know, it's Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security are going to be at risk if we don't do something about cutting spending. One of the numbers that has come out, I'm not sure it's completely accurate, but generally speaking, it's correct, is in the last 3 years, the federal government has grown by 40%. You can't do that. You can't grow over 10% every year of the federal government, the agencies, the bureaucracies.
How worried should Hoosiers be about losing access to federally funded programs such as Social Security or veterans benefits?
Well, I just started Social Security. I'm 66 and 5 months now. I started a month ago. I wouldn't worry about we have promised, the Republicans have promised that we're going to protect veterans. I'm also a veteran. I won't waver on that. And Social Security, I don't think that is not going to be at risk in the short term. We do have to address it in the long term. What that takes, I think, is mature people come to the table and say, what are we going to do about this shortfall of revenues coming in? How do we address that?
Coming up, why Indiana's Attorney General wants the governor to send the National Guard to the border. Welcome back. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has written the nation's governors asking them to send all available law enforcement personnel to the border. The governors of Florida and Idaho already have done so. Attorney General Todd Rokita says Indiana should do the same. I caught up with Rokita shortly after the letter was published. With us now is Attorney General Todd Rokita. Mr. Attorney General, thanks for joining us today.
You bet, Garrett.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott has asked the state's governors to send law enforcement resources to the border. How much authority do governors, including our governor, Eric Holcomb, have to respond to a request in the absence of any federal declarations?
Well, I think he's got all the authority he needs as commander-in-chief, certainly, of the Indiana Guard. So I don't think it's a matter of authority. I think it's a matter of willingness. Let me tell you this, not speaking for the governor, speaking for 7 million Hoosiers who I represent as Attorney General. I've been to the border 3 times on our behalf. I have 3 lawsuits going against the Biden administration at this very minute, trying to get the money back for the extra expenses we have in educating these kids when they come across illegally, the fentanyl that's coming across and increasing deaths and other costs in our community, and not to mention just the increase in crime. So we're suing on all those fronts to try to get some of our money back. We should be spending, and I've said this publicly before, we should be spending some money by sending the Guard, our Guard, down to the Texas border, not to do paperwork, not to transfer anybody, but to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Texas Rangers like I did, and other Texas law enforcement like I did 3 times going down there, because we need to stop this illegal immigration from happening. Why Indiana? Why these other states? Because when there's no border, when there's no border policy, when there's lawlessness at the border, every state's a border state. Should Governor Eric Holcomb send troops and or state police down to the Texas border? Yes. What specifically should he send? Well, I mean, I'm not the governor to say what specifically he should send, but as the commander-in-chief, yes, that is an option. Yes, it should be done, because when you're not enforcing the border, when the federal government's not doing their job, the answer is not to not have the job done. The answer is to solve the problem, because I am telling you, I am in court 3 different ways, 3 different lawsuits, trying to recoup money and get injunctive relief for this state because of the extra costs we have directly related to illegal border incursions. So we should send our resources down to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Texas Rangers, other Texas law enforcement, to keep illegal aliens from crossing our border. And you could call them asylum seekers, you can call them migrants, you can call them whatever you want. You'd be wrong, because they're crossing the border illegally, so they are illegal aliens.
You mentioned the fentanyl epidemic earlier. In 2018, only about 16% of the drug smuggling convictions involved people who were in the country illegally. About 3/4 of those convictions were U.S. citizens. Given those numbers, why focus so much on people who are here unlawfully? Why not instead focus your resources on our neighbors who are bringing all this stuff in?
Certainly there's a demand, and there's for a long time been unfortunately a drug demand as part of our culture in America. That is no excuse for Mexican cartels, for the Chinese, and for others to exploit the situation by forcing drugs through our border. Plus, it's dangerous. You know, we've talked about fentanyl, we talked about increased crime. What about the human trafficking? What about the human mules that are being used? The human beings being packed with these drugs and being sent literally like animals across the border, carrying the weight of these drugs. You know, so there's a huge human trafficking element to this too, a human slavery element, which human trafficking is. It's modern day slavery, whether it's humans being used for sex, humans being used as pack mules, or anything else. So that's the reason to stop it. This idea that it's Americans' fault first is an excuse, and it's wrong. It's no excuse for keeping the border open. It's a reason to close the border.
One other thing I wanted to address, the state's own data show that bias crimes against people of Hispanic or Latino descent are up roughly 7-fold compared to less than a decade ago. That was before Donald Trump ran for president and brought immigration to the forefront. Do you believe the rhetoric surrounding immigration, including right now, including possibly some of your own, played a role in that?
Absolutely not. I think it's a ridiculous thing to say, to think, because everyone should be for the rule of law. I don't care what color your skin is or not. And the fact of the matter is, Donald Trump was right to bring immigration up because it was a broken system before. And the only policy in terms of immigration that has worked over the last several years is Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. And that policy said, look, if you try to cross our border, we're going to get you, because we're going to fully staff our Border Patrol, and we're going to have them execute on what the law is. We're not going to have them stand down as this excuse for a president is doing. And what President Trump says, well, you can ask for asylum, that's part of our law, but while you're waiting for that court date, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, you're going to wait in Mexico. You're not going to get released into the interior of this country to create havoc or anything else you're doing. You're going to remain in Mexico. And what that did, when the world understood that, they stopped coming, because it stopped the incentive to come across our border illegally. And if they did come, they came legally. And that's the brilliance of President Trump's policy.
Coming up, Indiana's best political team tackles the debt ceiling, the border crisis, and more. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we bring in two members of Indiana's best political team, Republican Tom John and Democrat with the surge in border crossings following the end of Title 42. Kip, did the Biden administration move too late to deal with the surge?
Well, I mean, people aren't getting across the border, and I think that's the number one criteria you got to look at. There was all this gloom and gloom, and the sky is falling. All these folks are getting across the border, and the fact of the matter is that hasn't happened. There's obviously a humanitarian crisis at the border. America still is the land of opportunity for a lot of people. A lot of folks want to live here. That's a good thing. That's something that we want to encourage, but we first want to encourage it to be legal. We don't want, illegal fentanyl, getting across the border for sure. But we've had, 30 years of failure by both parties to have a sane immigration system. We've had several chances to pass it, and both parties have fallen down on the job. And I think, even the former president, Trump, spent 3 years to build a wall that he thought was going to solve it, and he couldn't get that done himself. So there's lots of blame to go on immigration. If both parties they've had compromises in front of them in years past and have not been able to come together. That's what needs to happen. We need the same policy. We need both parties to be rational about this. I'm afraid the unfortunate thing is people want to use it as a political cudgel and don't really want to solve the problem.
Tom, we heard from Attorney General Todd Rokita in the last segment about sending in the National Guard. If Republican governors, including Holcomb, act on their own, how does this not lead to confusion over who's in charge at the border?
Well, I mean, I think it does lead to confusion. And I think Kip's right. This is a problem that's been festering for a while, and both parties own some of it. But clearly, Biden and his administration have failed in their leadership on this. He's had dozens of executive orders regarding the border and immigration, all of which were guided to really de-restrict the borders and to create a lot of the conditions that are creating this crisis. And frankly, the most telling thing is when Mayor Adams from New York City is criticizing his own president over this. There's been a huge failure by President Biden in this issue. And now you're left where people are trying to do their best to respond to it because of lack of leadership at the top. So I think if Texas wants the help, they need the help. And if the states are willing to help each other because the federal government's been unable to step up, I think that's something worth exploring. But the point Kip made is right. We got to come together and have an honest discussion about what immigration means and what it's meant to the history of this country and what it means to the future of the country. And you don't see that in Washington, D.C. right now, and you don't see the person who should be leading the conversation having it.
Let's stay with national politics. As we heard earlier in the show, Congressman Greg Pence says he thinks we will see a debt ceiling deal, but a top House budget negotiator says the talks are at a standstill. Tom, will House Republicans in particular agree to a deal that does not include deep spending cuts?
Well, I think they're going to get the absolute maximum spending cuts that they can. And I think there are a lot of spending cuts to be had when you look at the spending spree that's gone on in the last 3 years. And you look at the inflation that's been triggered by that. So they're right to step up and really dig in and take a stand. That being said, both sides need to be conscious of the fact that the credit rating of the United States, the full faith and credit of the U.S. are essential to our strength in the world, and we need to protect that at all costs, whatever that is. And we can't just bluster and just stand up and not get a deal done. So I hope they get the best deal done they can to rein in spending, but they need to be conscious of the consequences of not getting a deal done.
Kip, I'll let you respond, but I also want to ask you, given our $31 trillion debt, and let me flip that question around, would Democrats be willing to cut some spending in exchange for some debt ceiling increase?
Let me respond first to Tom by saying the only time we have a debt ceiling crisis is when there's a Democratic president and a Republican have some part of Congress. The entire time Donald Trump was president, we had debt ceiling that we were close to exceeding, and Democrats worked together to pass it. It is a manufactured crisis that Republicans continue to use when a Democrat in the White House to try to force their agenda upon a democratically elected president who doesn't want to do what they want to do. The place to have discussions about spending is during the budget process, not during the debt ceiling crisis or the manufactured debt ceiling crisis. Should there be cuts? I mean, it's open for debate, but we've already spent this money. This is paying your bills. This is not about when your budget's right. And I would add, with respect to your question, it was the Republicans under Donald Trump who exploded the deficit with tax cuts. And if they don't want to put those on the table, then we really don't have anything to talk about with regard to that.
I want to briefly turn to some elections that were in the news. Republicans lost mayor seats in Jacksonville, Florida, and in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Both are longtime GOP strongholds. Briefly, Kip and Tom, is this a warning to national Republicans?
Well, I'll go first. I don't know if it is or not, but it is. The trend continues that the suburbs and the cities are going Democratic, and I think it's in large part a reaction to the Trump presidency and the toxic nature of the Republican Party. Reasonable folks are looking at
Kip,
that.
I need to give Tom the last word here. We're almost out of time.
Right.
Well, I mean, I think it's a question of candidates and it's a question of particular races, and you can't draw broad conclusions from municipal races, which tend to be lower turnout affairs. So I think there's a lot to be written in the next 18 months before we have an election in 24.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us. We'll be right back.
Take All Indiana Politics on the go with you. Download our podcast now. Part of the All Indiana Podcast Network and allindianapodcastnetwork.com.
Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics. Be sure to tune in next Sunday morning for our live coverage of the festivities leading up to the Indy 500. We'll be back here next Sunday at 9:30 in the morning. Have a great rest of your weekend.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.